plans for your review on February 22nd. This was to allow the community to have 30 days to review prior to March 22nd, and that's when it will be presented to the City Council for approval. Tonight, we're going to walk you through the approximately $100 million investment that is necessary on North Mare Island to address 4 critical issues of sea level rise, liquefaction risk, unstable soils, and the need for new infrastructure that must be done prior to any new development. Since we are assuming these costs when we acquire North Island on an as-is basis, including our existing specific plan, tonight we'll outline a timetable for collaborating with you on the new specific plan for the entire island, which we can do once we've acquired North Island land. And then finally, we'll review an overview of the current DDA and a comparison review of the current DDA terms with the prior 2019 and 2020 term sheets. Also tonight, we'll address your questions regarding our commitment to invest funds to address sea level rise. As I said before, liquefaction risks, unbuildable soils, and inadequate infrastructure reflecting the negotiated price for North Island. Your whole Mare Island team is here tonight to answer questions you have been asking and take any new ones that you have tonight. We also have Gillian Hayes, the acting city manager, with us tonight, and she will be walking you through the comparison of the 2019 and 2020 DDA business terms. Quick overview of the Zoom system tonight. We are having all chat questions go through to the moderator, and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. Those of you who have been with us before, remember that I get very confused when they come to me. So I'm going to have them go to all one place, and we'll start by addressing questions that came in prior to tonight, and then all of those that you guys asked during the presentation. And then at the very end, we'll open up for people who want to ask their questions live, and we'll set up some parameters on timing for that to make sure that everyone can be heard. So thank you again for joining us. We're really excited to have this opportunity to walk you through everything. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Tom D'Alessandro, our president.
Thank you, Cheryl. And thanks everyone for joining us. It's good to see what are becoming more familiar faces as we have some of these town hall meetings. As Cheryl said, we want to talk to you about the value of North Mare Island and the cost of our proposed acquisition of North Mare Island. There are several aspects of the acquisition I hope you'll agree can be valuable to us as well as to residents of Vallejo. First and foremost is the opportunity to collaborate together on a new island plan for Mare Island, one where we would be hosting charrettes and workshops to create forums for exchanging ideas. This will be the first time a significant effort has been undertaken to re-envision the future of the entire island. In this effort, we see ourselves wearing 3 hats. First, one is out of our respect for the historic built and natural environment. It compels us to act as stewards of Mare Island's rich heritage. Second, as you remind us on every one of our town hall meetings, we must act as catalysts for the redevelopment of Mare Island's existing properties, offices, factories, and for the development of new places that will entice residents and workers to move to Mare Island for their homes and their jobs. Finally, and third, we know that to robustly fill the roles of steward and catalyst, we have to collaborate with everyone on the call and beyond the call, everyone in the city. The second benefit of our acquisition of Mare Island is it allows us to address serious threats to the rest of Mare Island. As Cheryl mentioned, in our negotiations on the disposition and development agreement, we have committed to invest funds to address several risks that all of Mare Island face because of North Mare Island's location where our 2 ingress and egress points are. And those are sea level rise, liquefaction risk, unbuildable soils, and inadequate infrastructure. Our acquisition will create the opportunity for North Mare Island to be transformed from a deserted property with few potential uses to a vibrant center for living, working, and recreating in an attractive waterfront environment. The ownership map we're looking at shows you holistically the current ownerships and the current way in which neighborhoods relate to each other. It shows how they work together. We're going to be focusing on the area that's in the red, circled in red, and that's North Mare Island. And so what does Vallejo get out of the sale? Most significantly, it gets a commitment from us to invest, as Cheryl said, over $100 million to make North Mare Island estimated a place where people can find homes, find jobs, and fall in love with a very special place. This sizable investment really only makes sense because we are taking a very long-term view of Mare Island's future. That doesn't mean we intend to drag our feet and develop at a slow pace, but we understand that even if we're moving as fast as we can, it will take the better part of a decade to fix North Mare Island, to do all of the things that are required to fix it. And after that, it will take decades to realize its full potential. Make no mistake, this is not just a long-term investment in Mare Island, it is a long-term investment in the city of Vallejo. I know that Gillian Hayes of the city and Andrea Jones of our team, Mare Island, will be addressing some of the other DDA benefits to us in the city. So I'm going to skip to or stay focused on the primary benefits. And so I'd now like to focus more on these threats to Mare Island due to its existing conditions and the cost of fixing them. The next slide, I guess the next slide, shows Young Bay mud mapping. And if you look at the lower right, that's where North Mare Island is. And you can see a lot of North Mare Island, all of North Mare Island really, is mud. And it's inconsistent, and it's also military debris, and it's not consistent in its load-bearing capacity or its texture or granularity. So it's not stable. Additionally, the next map shows you sea level rise, the impact of sea level rise. And if you look at the, now we flipped so that North Mare Island was on the right, on the last map it's on the left now, but still, the idea remains the same. If you look at where North Mare Island is and you look at where Highway 37 is, you see that basically Mare Island, and you see where the causeway is, you see that basically a sea level rise is a direct threat to ingress and egress on Mare Island by bus or by car or truck because the access points will be underwater. So we could also go over the liquefaction maps and some of the other maps we've shown you in the past, but basically these are, and this is actually current flood zones, but if you go out 25 years and beyond, you'll see it changing. So you may remember in the prior times we've talked about North Mare Island in these meetings, we've had folks from NGO. NGO is a consultant who you see their name on this slide. And they are they were the city's geotechnical consultant in evaluating North Mare Island at times when there were prior firms that wanted to think about moving there. And some of these issues dissuaded them. They didn't have the same horizon. So the fact is, as Cheryl indicated, the agreement we have with the city, with the potential agreement, is pretty clear. We are buying North Mare Island as is, warts and all, without the entitlements necessary to achieve the kind of place we want to see rise up on this part of the island. This means we have to address what we've been referring to, I guess, as these four major issues: sea level rise, the need to import quality soil, the need to compact that quality soil, and to address liquefaction. So we'll move to the next slide. And this is looking at NGO. So again, this is the city consultant, NGO, their estimate, and they've updated their estimate. And the first thing we have to do to address sea level rise and poor soils is import fill. And their estimate is, at one point they had just rounded it to 2 million, but it's 1.9 million cubic yards of good fill dirt. And they're now estimating it to $25 a cubic yard, which is higher than their former estimate. But we're seeing that we're not the only people who have waterfront property on the San Francisco Bay, and therefore we're not the only people who need landfill dirt to address sea level rise issues. But once we have the dirt, it has to be surcharged, has to be used to surcharge the property. And so it has to be compact and stabilize the soils. So the cost of the importing of dirt is estimated at $47,500,000. The estimate, again, that we don't know until you get started what you're actually going to find, but we believe the cost of compacting and stabilizing soils is $20 million. What's not reflected here is the time. We don't know that we can just go to, we know we can't go to Home Depot and just say, give us 1.9 million cubic yards of dirt. We have to get it when it's available. And the same with surcharging. Once we start the surcharging, it takes months to accomplish. So the issues with the poor soils are totaling in the estimates from NGO $67,500,000. Now, after we've done this, we'll move to the next slide. All of this importation of dirt and surcharging will pretty much put out of service the roads for a period of time with temporary roads. We'll have to put in new sewer, water lines, underground cable lines, telecommunication, et cetera. So we're going to have to basically do planning, actually build new roads and infrastructure, and then we're also going to have to demolish the remaining buildings before we can do that. So we have the demolition cost of the remaining buildings and these other improvement costs to rebuild the infrastructure at being valued by David Tassig, who was hired by the city to do these estimates at $33,611,500. So that gives you a total, the next slide. If you say the estimated costs to improve North Mare Island, again, using NGO and Tassig's numbers from the city, importing dirt, compacting and stabilizing the soil is $67,500,000. And the infrastructure replacement, rebuilding all of the infrastructure on North Mare Island, is $33,600,000 plus. So the total costs to improve Mare Island are $101 million. I'll just round it. But that is really not the only cost. So if we go to the next slide, we also have to repay the city for the demolition they've already done. Sometimes that's called the cost to acquire North Mare Island of $3 million. So the total cost, if you add the $101 million to bring in the dirt, compact it, rebuild all the infrastructure, and then pay for the city's cost of the existing buildings they've torn down, you have $104 million. And I would say if you were going to a car dealer and you said, okay, how much is that car? And you pay for some of it by trading in your old car, and you pay for some of it with a mortgage or a car loan, and you pay for some of it with cash, the price is all of the considerations that you've made to make the acquisition. And so when we look at the price of North Mare Island and the benefits to the city and all of us of having North Mare Island rebuilt so that it's stable, that it could become a place instead of what it is today. And so when we look at the price, it's all of the considerations that the city is evaluating. If we did not make these commitments to bring in the dirt, to compact the dirt, to rebuild the infrastructure, to pay them for the demolition costs of the buildings they already tore down, all of those values were part of the consideration from the city's perspective of what they wanted from us to allow us to acquire the island. Next slide. So what does this mean? And I think what we'd like to look at is the land value and the land cost. Appraisal was done a few years ago that said that if the land were, all of these improvements were in place, good utilities, good soils, the right height of the land so it was protected against sea level rise, if everything were shovel ready, the land would be worth a little over $15 million, or a little less than $100,000 an acre. Our costs, not 15 million, our costs are 104 million. And these are just estimates, so they could be more, which on a per acre basis is $663,000 an acre. The net value of the land, when you say its value if it were in good shape, minus the cost of fixing it, is a minus $88 million. Now, the city did an appraisal a while back that said it did not include the importation of dirt and did not include the surcharging. So it didn't capture the lion's share of the costs. But what's relevant here is the price, the total considerations of what we have to spend to acquire North Mare Island, both in cash to the city and in commitments to the city that will make all of these improvements, are costs that are equal to paying almost 7 times the land value, 6.7 times the value. And of course, we have no guarantee that these costs, that this could be brought in at these numbers. So we're still subject to risk that the numbers come in higher. For example, the rebuilding the utilities, that's really just a ballpark number and it dates from 2019, so it's 3 years old. So we're looking at this and we think that we're getting something that is long-term critical to us on Mare Island to protect our ingress and egress, to protect our front door, to protect our future. But also the city is getting the benefit as well. And everybody who is on Mare Island already working there or living there has the security of knowing, they won't need a boat to get off the island. So this effort, we've had just a number of discussions with people who didn't quite understand the impact of all of the commitments we're making. So again, it's like buying the car with a car loan. All of the commitments you're making are not just the initial cash, it's everything you're spending to meet the seller's requirements of what they insist on in order for them to sell the land to you. I think with that, I think we've kind of looked at this and we've made the points I wanted to make. And so at this point, I'd like to turn the conversation over to Gillian, who will walk you through some of the comparisons of the earlier term sheet and the current one.
Good evening. Hi, everyone. Great to see you this evening. I'm happy to talk about the differences in the project negotiations from the 2019 term sheet that the City Council approved and the 2020 term sheet that City Council approved, some updates, and then to the current draft DDA terms and points. Just to remind you, I was not involved in the 2019 initial term sheet. It was right when I was hired, and the ED manager at the time had negotiated that with the city team and the potential owner for Nimitz. I came on board after that and then started working on the 2020 updated term sheet. Myself and Paul Kelly and Aaron Hanford are part of the city team, along with Veronica Nev, our city attorney, who helped to negotiate the 2020 term sheet and the DDA terms that you will see today in the proposal. So I'm going to go through these terms. This matrix is also on the project website for the city, so you can just Google City of Vallejo NMI DDA, and all of the documents will come up on that website. So if you want to get a deeper dive, feel free to do so. So I'm going to just do a high-level review tonight, and then write your questions down. If you have questions, I can fill in more detail as we go along this evening. So the first term in 2019 was negotiated that Nimitz would hold 4 public meetings per year. The 2020 term sheet, we took that requirement out because they were doing much more than 4 per year. And we talked about them maintaining an active website, dealing with all activities on the islands. And they have been doing public workshops with you all that have been involved. You would know they've held 5 public workshop meetings in 2020 and 7 in 2021, beyond that original 4 meeting term. And I believe they are committed to continue to doing these meetings moving forward through this process, which is great. The more public input and outreach, the better. So in the initial 2019 term sheet, development requirements that were negotiated were 100,000 square feet of building in year 5 after the DDA was signed, in year 8 after the DDA was signed, and in year 11 after the DDA was signed. In 2020, when I began negotiating, I quickly realized that this was already going to be happening during the negotiation of the term sheet, and very soon, way before year 5 ever would have come. So at that point, we started talking with Nimitz and Southern Land as their land manager to see what other opportunities that we could get for the community here in the city of Vallejo. We added some other obligations regarding minimum assessed property tax values, making sure that they develop in a timely manner. Otherwise, they would be liable for paying the taxes even if they didn't develop on a certain amount. So we had those terms added in 2020. And then we had discussions about a phase 1 of development to happen during the DDA drafting, which did get put into the DDA. And I think many of you have seen the Connolly Corridor concept, which is really, really exciting. It's 75,000 square feet of retail and office, 194,000 square feet of open space, and potentially 373 residential units and up to a 200-room boutique hotel. So that phasing here in this DDA is far beyond the scope of the original development contemplated in the 2019 term sheet. Took lots of negotiating on both ends, but I think that this has really resulted in a great path forward for the city and the developer and potential landowner. So originally in 2019, there was a lease agreement that would create a taxable leasehold interest that Nimitz would pay those taxes. In the 2020, Nimitz and Southern quickly observed that, as we just discussed, as Tom just outlined, the costs of pre-development requirements for this property were going to be much more than they originally had thought. And so after that, they decided, and we made the decision together, that it probably would be best to move with more of a purchase and sale agreement, because just like when we go to look for houses, we're not going to go put on a new roof and add an extra bathroom if we don't own the property, right? So they're going to be investing so much money that they really did want to have the opportunity to own. And so, yes, after closing, we're transferring all taxes over to Nimitz to be paid, and the city will not be on the hook for those anymore. Beautification plan. So in 2019, there was an opportunity for a new interim beautification and security plan within 18 months. In 2020, we were already working on the security and fencing and lighting plan, which was kind of that interim beautification. And then we set some additional milestones in the proposed DDA that they complete a fully comprehensive beautification plan on the island. And as Tom had alluded to, the development over the island will take time, but we really want to see something happen now out there, right? So we focused on some entry points. And if you click on that draft DDA document, one of the exhibits is an actual SketchUp plan of those areas of landscaping and lighting and, just kind of pedestrian amenities that we're looking at enhancing pretty immediately while the planning and the development goes on, so that you that live out there will be driving by and experiencing that beautification. And then longer term, the development will fill in. Next slide, please.
You who live out there, what about the rest of us?
And you who enjoy the island as well. Okay, backbone infrastructure. In 2019, Nimitz was to submit a plan before the expiration of the first extension of the DDA that would talk about backbone infrastructure that would be required. In 2020, when we started talking about the purchase of the land, we then had within 24 months of the DDA agreement, that purchase and sale agreement, that the backbone infrastructure plan would be drafted and ready to roll alongside the specific plan. So in the DDA, we pulled that forward from the 2020 term sheet. And again, within 24 months, you'll see the new specific plan and the backbone infrastructure plan. Those go hand in hand, right? If there's an increase in density and intensities of use on the island, we really need that analysis for sewer, water, storm drain, road systems, all of those things, so that we know that that infrastructure is being put in and phased in appropriately with the new development coming down the line. Security and maintenance. Nimitz originally was to assume all maintenance and security upon execution. Again, in 2020, we had issued a new security license agreement with the city and Nimitz to assume all those maintenance and costs at transfer. And that has been brought forward through into the DDA. The HUD loan. So the city has a loan that we owe to HUD. At this point, our balance is approximately $240,000. And originally in 2019, it was contemplated that the Nimitz Southern Land would be paying off that loan at transfer. In 2020, we updated that to a $3 million purchase price, despite whatever the loan balance was, so that as the city paid through over the negotiating terms, that money would come back to the city. And again, into the DDA at initial conveyance, the city's loan amount, which is about 2.3, as I said, will be paid in full using the $3 million purchase price. The Navy properties, Navy was going to sublease, Nimitz was going to sublease from the Navy until that, which time that property was transferred to the city in 2019. Same term in the 2020 and then into the DDA, same thing. So the initial conveyance will be the city-owned property, and then Nimitz will continue to sublease the 32 acres that the Navy still owns through a sub-LIFOC document, which is attached to the DDA if you want to jump into the details on that. And then important to mention that once the property is conveyed to the city from the Navy, Nimitz will immediately take ownership of that additional land, and then will be annexed into the CFDs, and they will reimburse all the costs of that annexation into the CFDs. The local use tax for construction and equipment sales, this was something contemplated in 2019, that any contractors with contracts of $5 million or more would have to specify North Mare Island as their place of use, so that the city would receive a portion or all of that portion of the local sales tax instead of it going back to the county. We pulled that forward in 2020, and it is within the DDA terms that are drafted for council proposal. Local economic benefits in 2019, it wasn't really outlined. So in 2020, we detailed a little bit more. We talked about goals for local and minority hiring, purchasing of construction materials locally, any supplies that they were going to use for the development of the property locally. So Nimitz, those requirements are pulled forward in the draft DDA and Exhibit M, local economic benefit program requirements. We added some local job creation, workforce development, inclusion of minority women and locally owned business as contemplated before. And so we really kind of beefed up that section. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, here we go. Purchase price. So in 2019, as I said before, it was just fair market value, but no less than the HUD payoff loan amount. In 2020, we updated that to $3 million, despite whatever the HUD loan payoff would be. And then that was pulled forward into the DDA. The purchase price is $3 million, and the city currently owes about $2.3 million on the HUD loan, which will be paid immediately upon transfer at closing. Okay, property acquisition. Originally, as I stated before, was contemplated that Nimitz would do a ground lease with the option to purchase later. After looking at the numbers, in 2020, we updated the term sheet to include this DDA agreement, purchase sale agreement path instead. And so moving forward, this DDA is a disposition and development agreement that is actually outlining the purchase and sale of the North Mare Island property to the Nimitz Group. The term originally was 3 years, totaling with some extensions totaling 19. And again, now we will be closing initially 125 acres within 30 days after the approval of pre-closing conditions, but no more than 120 days after the signing of the DDA if the council approves it. Site transfer conditions. In 2019, we required a demonstration of starting demolition with some of the existing improvements, including some infrastructure and the HUD loan payoff. In 2020, we tightened it up a little bit. We wanted the beautification plan started and shovels hitting the ground, some grading and demo permits attained, and finalizing of the demolition plan agreement. So it was more than just saying we're going to start working on it, but it was actually getting the plan and the contractor in place. And then again, the HUD loan payoff at purchase price, and all of those have been pulled forward into the current proposed DDA terms. So there was some concern on the council's part about transferring. So we're going to sell the property to the Nimitz group, but what if they turn back around in 6 months and sell it for triple the cost to somebody else? So in 2019, the requirement was that the tentative map and backbone infrastructure plan had to be approved before any transfer could happen. A lot of times developers will approve entitlements and then sell the entitlements. In 2020, we tightened that up a little bit and talked about after entitlements, the specific plan that the transfer parcels can take place, but anything that's more than a 20% transfer in one single transfer is subject to the city council's approval, not to be unreasonably withheld, but basically if a new developer wants to come on board and take some of the entitlement that Nimitz has attained, we want to make sure that they are on the up and up, that they have a tried and true track record, and that they're actually going to move forward with the development of the city. So that I think is a really strong aspect of the new proposed DDA. Next slide, please. Okay. Initially, after leasing with the option to buy, there was multiple phases in the closing of the property. In 2020, we really tightened that up to 2, the initial closing on the city-owned property, and then as soon as the Navy-owned land transfers, it may be 1 or more closings, but that would happen as they are transferred. So that initial transfer of the 125 of the city term was moved into the current DDA. And then once the Navy has transferred their pieces, as I said, they will also transfer over to Nimitz. Oh, sorry, I got muted somehow, and then it was saying the host will not allow you to unmute. I'm like, I'm presenting. Okay, sorry. Okay, so CFDs. So originally, Nimitz was just to reimburse the city for the payment of the CFDs on the 157 acres. Sorry, my puppy's freaking out. And in 2020, we had the agreements moved forward that Nimitz would reimburse the city for the CFD for the 28 acres immediately for the area that they were had the laydown lease, and that they would assume all CFD payments for the remaining acreage when it transferred, and that also that Nimitz would commit to annexing the Navy property once that transferred over to them as well, and that was brought forward into the new draft DDA terms as well. In the building inventory in 2019, the term sheet required Nimitz to submit a historic building inventory prior to their first extension. In 2020, at that time of the term sheet update, it was already completed. So that one is not included in the DDA because it's done. Demolition of structures out on the island. So the city began to demolish some of those structures. So in 2019, at the term sheet, the term was that the city would continue to finish those demolition of the non-utilized buildings out on North Mare Island. In 2020, when Nimitz changed their interest into purchasing the property, we negotiated that they would finish the demolition of the buildings within 24 months of its initial first closing. That cost estimate is a savings to the city of about $2 million. So that was brought forward into the terms of the DDA itself. Thank you. Next slide. Soil testing and relocation. In 2019, there were no terms around the subject. In 2020, we talked about Nimitz testing the existing stockpiles. So there's some stockpiles that have been sitting out there for a while. We'd like to see if they're clean. If they're clean, let's use them and let's start the soil recharging. So after closing, the Nimitz has to test those stockpiles within 12 months and relocate within 2 years to start that development site prep. And that was moved forward into the current DDA terms. Larger soil prep. Oops, sorry. Hold on one second. Okay, my 7-year-old's on the corgi. Okay, the soil prep in the overall island soil prep. We talked in 2020 about requiring a little bit more on that soil prep to have Nimitz to import some clean fill and begin raising the elevation to start the pre-development. And as we worked further into negotiations, we discovered that the amount of soil and the truck generation that it was going to cause is going to require some further CEQA, most likely a full EIR. So we decided that this importation of clean fill is going to be a post-closing obligation rather than a pre-closing or, happening during the specific plan. So we're going to take a look at those environmental impacts with great detail moving forward as we work on the specific plan and the backbone infrastructure plan together. So the new specific plan requirements, there was no requirements in 2019. In 2020, we really wanted to contemplate the island as a whole and the land use of the community and that people living there and playing and working out on Mare Island would like to see on the island as a whole. So we required as a post-closing requirement that Nimitz Southern Land submit a new specific plan within 24 months of the signing of the DDA. We pulled that forward into the DDA. So that specific plan alongside the backbone infrastructure plan, as I stated before, will be submitted to the city. And as soon as the DDA is signed, then we can start all of this great collaborative work, garnering support and input and ideas on what the community would like to see on the island and get that specific planning project started. I'm really excited for that to happen if the council chooses to sign this DDA. So minimum assessed value property tax covenant, it's a pilot agreement, property tax covenant. So basically, this is going to guarantee that Nimitz Southern Land gets moving on the development of the site and doesn't sit for 20 years and do nothing. What this agreement that we negotiated in 2020 as a new term, what it does is that it identifies that property taxes and school taxes that would have been paid as if the property were developed are going to be due from Nimitz, even if they don't develop. So 5 years after the DDA, if they have not invested at least $26 million into the development on the island, then they're going to have to pay taxes as if they did. So what that in today's dollars, which it would be more later, but so we pulled that through to the DDA, and that is a good opportunity to ensure that all of the post-closing obligations are met and the city and the community actually realize their visions for the island and the future development. Next slide, please. Okay, one thing that in 2019, the development at that time was contemplated to be under the existing specific plan, which is largely a lot of industrial, some additional residential, but as we worked with the community and we worked with the council and we started contemplating a new specific plan that the community could be involved with, we decided there were certain uses that we'd heard loud and clear from the community that they didn't want to see in Vallejo, and especially not on Mare Island. So we put some of those uses into an exclusion section in the draft DDA. Uses such as cement batch plants, like heavy dumps, recycling facilities, big, large, heavy industrial refineries, those types of industrial uses, and as well as cannabis dispensary facilities are prohibited uses under this purchase and sale agreement, DDA. Potential future property payments, there was nothing contemplated in 2019. In 2020, we had some of our council members thinking, well, if Nimitz Southern Land gets a specific plan adopted and then they come back in 10 or 15 years and they want to double it and they're going to make a bunch of money, then we want to see some of that profit moving forward. So we've got some language in the draft DDA that talks about how we would outline that methodology in the future. And basically what it's going to look like is at the time of the specific plan, when we're clear on what the development intensities look like and what the backbone infrastructure needs are, then at that time, we'll have some numbers and some hard costs, and we'll be able to understand what's being proposed in the specific plan. Then we'll probably work on a calculation at that point and have basically it's like an equation where you can input in, okay, this is the increase in density they're asking for, and it can be either a per door, a per unit, a per square foot, a little bit of a kickback down to the city, like, okay, we're going to increase our densities by 50%, and we're going to give the city a certain percentage of that profit to say, here's a little share in the profit moving forward. So that is brought forward into the DDA at that high level. Reimbursement credits and deferrals was not contemplated in 2019. In 2020, we put it into the DDA that again, any type of impact fee credit or deferrals, I really wasn't comfortable negotiating those terms now, not knowing what that new plan was going to look like and what that potential future development would be. So we did put the language in there, and we will be deferring that discussion at which point that we're looking at the specific plan and the backbone infrastructure plan. We can defer the discussion all the way up until building permit if we wanted to, but I'm hoping that once we have an idea of development out there, then we can talk about the cost of the infrastructure, which we know will be very high, and how the city can potentially partner in helping move that infrastructure forward. Water and sewer system reimbursements. As we moved forward, we realized that the city and Vallejo Flood and Waste District have ongoing maintenance, costs for water, sewer, storm drain, roads, all across North Mare Island. And we were able to negotiate that the potential developer would incur those costs during the time of the specific planning and infrastructure planning. So that is also a really big win for the city, saving tens of thousands of dollars while we get the plan in place before the actual new infrastructure is installed. With that being said, we also required an irrevocable offer to dedicate all city streets. So they're going to be owning North Mare Island, but they have to dedicate all the streets. And when the city's ready and the streets are brought up to city standards, street standards, then we could activate that offer to dedicate and bring them back into the ownership of the city. But we will always have the access to the streets and the easements over those roadways to make sure that they do remain open for the public. Building 571 reimbursement obligation. During Nimitz's due diligence, as I spoke earlier, some of the buildings on North Mare Island were demolitioned by city hired contractors. And during due diligence, Nimitz discovered that one of those buildings had contained PCBs, and there was some contaminated leftover building material that was spread across the top of that site. So the city is really responsible for cleaning that up. We did not know that the contractor had done that. I don't think the contractor even knew, but we have started a budget and a remediation plan, and we are working with Nimitz to ensure that that work is done at the city's expense post-closing, if not completed prior. So we're working on that moving forward. Next slide, please. Next slide.
Thank you, Gillian.
There we go.
That was very, very helpful and very comprehensive. We appreciate it. And we're not going to let you continue and have to take on what's next. We're going to bring Andrea up and let her talk to some of the points in a little bit more detail.
Great. So I believe Gillian touched on a lot of this in her presentation, so I will summarize them fairly briefly. So over the next few years after the DDA is signed, and hopefully that happens, on March 22nd, and we go forward with closing, we will have 4 major tasks to complete. As Gillian mentioned, the DDA will require us to demolish the 10 existing buildings on North Mare Island within 24 months after closing. We will also need to complete, which is a very large job, complete the design and construction of the Conley Street corridor projects within 60 months after closing. In addition to that, we need to design and submit for city approval an island-wide beautification plan within 8 months after closing. And then following that approval of that plan, we need to complete the beautification work around the bridge and the Highway 37 entry points, which you can see on this slide. And we need to do that within 8 months after approvals. We will also need to complete the balance of the beautification projects along South Mare Island within 24 months after closing. And then, of course, we can't forget the fact that we will begin working on a new island-wide specific plan and backbone infrastructure plan, working with you as the community and the city. The DDA requires us to submit a new specific plan within 24 months after closing, and also requires us to obtain approval from the city within 42 months after closing. One important thing to note here is that I know post-COVID, you, the community, met with HOKR architect on several occasions to discuss the specific plan in person. And moving forward in 2022, we intend to begin those in-person meetings again. So look for notifications as in the next few months, and we'll start that process. So those are 4 points, but that's a lot of work that needs to be done. So suffice it to say, we have a lot of work ahead of us, and we'll be working with you closely as well as the city staff to make all of this become a reality. And that's really it in a nutshell.
Great, thank you, Andrea. Hopefully this has answered a lot of your questions. And before we open up to questions, we want to talk a little bit more about what has been happening on the island and some more of what we plan on doing on the island other than North Mare Island the rest of 2022. So for that, I'm going to ask Brian Nagy to join us.
Yeah, thanks, Cheryl. Just wanted to take a quick look back on 2021 and then take a brief look ahead at 2022. While all of this work has been done, and it's a massive amount of work on the planning side, so I applaud everybody that contributed to that. I was riveted by a lot of the charts and graphs. It's just a lot of work. But looking back at 2021, I think we had a very busy year in the middle of COVID. It says something about how attractive this area is. We did have some work done on the North Island, as everybody saw. We put in some security fencing up there. We've expanded our security system with Golden Bay Security to patrol the streets. Our facilities team partners with the Public Works team to keep the dumping up there to a minimum. It can't eliminate it, obviously, but we've done a very nice job, and so has Public Works to split that up a little bit to try and keep it as clean as we can. So thanks to the Public Works Department for helping out on that front as well. And then we had some expansions, which are great to see. Mare Island Brewing Company expanded into the suite next to them. That's the Whale Room if you haven't been there. It's a great event space. I've seen a lot of people in there, so that's a good thing. And then Factory OS, as you know, expanded into another 100,000 square foot building in 2021. So that's really good activity. And then we have a new business coming in, also in the Coal Sheds, Mare Island Art Glass. They're in for permit right now for their tenant improvements and hope to open up shortly to the public, so you can start to take glass blowing classes there and see what happens there. And then back to the Public Works Department, we did work with them on doing some cleanup in the parks on Mare Island. So you'll see in Alden Park, it's been cleaned up a significant amount. And once again, a shout out to the Public Works Department for taking the initiative there. And we're hoping to get the lights turned back on in there. And that's a project for 2022, and we'll continue to work on that. So looking forward to 2022, our particular budget, we have plans to touch over 20 buildings on Mare Island. While all of the development is being planned, we're going to continue plugging away. That includes new roofs, that includes remodeling of buildings, demoing of buildings, painting, a variety of things. And so you'll see that going on throughout the year. And let's see what's left here. And then jumping back up to the North Mare Island, I'm hoping to expand what we started with the security fencing, et cetera. I'm chomping at the bit to see the buildings come down. I think that's going to help with security because there's people in the buildings and it's tough to keep them out. And then the beautification plan. I think we all want to see that happen ASAP. So what you're looking at on the screen at the moment is a building that we're working on. If you drive down the street on Walnut, you'll see it. The doors are open and we're working on that building right now to bring in a new tenant, large user. Obviously, it's a big building. It's one user. Can't announce who it is yet, but you'll be hearing about this in the coming months. It's very exciting, and I think we'll all be excited to have them on the island doing what they're going to be doing. So with that, I will hand it off to Cheryl.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, there's a lot of things going on, and we want to make sure that you're aware of them, which actually does tie into one of the questions that came in prior to tonight, asking that sometimes buildings come down or trees are removed. and you guys aren't always aware of it. I think you got a little bit of an understanding at the beginning of the presentation that we are not responsible for all the different areas of land on the island. When we know that something's happening or going to be happening, we're doing our best to communicate that out to you, and we'll continue to do so, and to work with the city and the other organizations that are responsible for things. So I do appreciate your question of, why aren't you hearing? And we're going to continue to do our best to get that information out and work really collaboratively with our partners on the island. But what I wanted to talk about here on what's next was just a little bit more of letting you know, our commitment to activating the island and doing things out here as we're in the planning stages. And so last year, even with the restrictions of COVID, we tried to get out and do some things on the island for the community, the immediate community that lives out there, but the greater community as well. We tried to do some drive-in movie nights in the parking lot behind the coal sheds. Didn't get too many people participating, but we gave it a shot. We also had a couple outdoor drive-in concerts out there. And then as the restrictions lifted a little bit on COVID, we moved over to the promenade side of the coal sheds, and we had a couple festivals and barbecues and concerts, and the Pedal Fest came back again, and we had a larger scale concert / festival, the Dock of the Bay, towards the end of the year. And we also participated in the waterfront weekend with Vallejo. So we did a fair amount for, a restricted year. And in 2022, we intend to continue that. Some of the events were successful and people really enjoyed. Others, we didn't get a great participation. So we're going to be reaching out to you guys for ideas of what you'd like to see this year. Some things we know we will be bringing back again: the Pedal Fest, the Dock of the Bay, some of the Mr. Hat Presents concerts. And we definitely want to do something for 4th of July. And we're already signed up to get more involved this year with the waterfront weekends with Vallejo. So a lot on that front coming up, and we're really excited about that. We also started, you can see the mural in front of you, we started an art program last year where if you came down to the promenade, you saw that we had 3 large scale sculptures out there. Two of them have been taken away. The third, that's behind Brian right now, is going to be moved shortly. And that's because we want to give the opportunity for different artists to come through and display work. So we're probably going to do another 3 this year. We're also hoping to do another mural this year on one of the buildings. And last year, we also had community paint sessions where we did some boards that are still out on the promenade, and one of them on the AT&T building on Walnut, which is a temporary that will be painted over again. So we're looking at continuing that art program again this year and growing it using local artists and also artists across the greater Bay Area to get people exposed to Mare Island and come out and see what we're doing there. So that's just a little bit on activation that we're very excited about. So with that, what I'd like to do is just address some of the questions that are coming in. And like I said earlier, we did get a couple questions ahead of time, just, why, and whoever sent that question, you phrased things so beautifully. So thank you for that. But the question, there were things that happened that we weren't, we as you guys, the community, weren't aware of. So we're going to do our best to make sure that we're letting you know of things ahead of time. Another question that came in is somebody was interested in knowing how close to the existing neighborhoods the Connolly corridor development was going to be. And I think Brian can walk you through that real easily.
Sorry, I was reading an email, Cheryl. I'm being completely honest.
Okay, we were just talking about, it must have been much more important than me. We were just talking about one of the questions that came in that was asking the proximity of the Connolly corridor development to the existing neighborhood.
Yeah, that's right. I did do a Google Earth search to double check that, and the closest corner from the residential area that we're proposing is roughly 500 feet from the corner of Flagship and Ajuar, which is right there. I believe that's a fourplex right on the corner there. So that's the closest point. So hopefully that answers your question.
Oh, sorry, I was reading an email.
Thank you.
Kidding. Okay, so I have a few questions that came in my chat, and I'll bring those up right now. One of the questions was, will BCDC allow additional fill on North Mare Island? And along with that question, will North Mare Island still be prone to liquefaction after the additional fill and compaction? I don't know if Andrea, if you want to take that one, or Brian, probably both of you could answer that.
I'm gonna let Andrea take that. That sounds very sciencey to me.
And sorry, I didn't hear the question.
What is up with stop sending emails?
I wasn't emailing. I'm so sorry.
I'm teasing. I'm sure it was Tom must have been talking to you. The question was, will BCDC allow additional fill on North Mare Island? And along with that question, will North Mare Island still be prone to liquefaction after the additional fill and compaction?
I'm not a geotechnical expert, but I can say that there'll probably be less sort of impacts of liquefaction with the compaction. Obviously, with a huge earthquake, everything, you don't know what's going to happen. But in terms of BCDC and filling, I can say in previous projects, yes, they have allowed us to fill.
Great. Thank you. Another question that came in was regarding future uses. The city residents had also rejected the idea of a casino or multiple casinos on North Mare Island. And the question is, why is that not in the agreement? Probably
I don't think
prohibiting it specifically.
I don't know. Well, Gillian may know. I don't remember whether it was excluded, but we're not intending to pursue a casino. We understood that desire not to do one.
It's not in one of the excluded uses, but to your point, Tom, it's not an allowed use in the existing plan, specific plan, and moving forward with the new specific plan, it's not my intent to move forward with that at this time.
Thank you. Yeah, I can say we're certainly not interested in doing that. What I'd like to do now is open it up for you guys to ask questions. So if you raise your hand, we can unmute you. We're going to be doing a 2-minute timer on you, not like the good old days when Jordan used to hold it up in your face, but we're gonna, some of you remember that. We're going to give 2 minutes just to make sure that everyone gets an opportunity to talk. And then if you want to get back in the queue, if you want to speak again, that's certainly an option. We are happy to be here as long as it takes to answer all of the questions. So I see Chris's hand up. Can we unmute Chris?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
I sent you a message over chat. And the question was, how much is the Mare Island Dry Dock paying a month for the use of Dry Dock 2 and 3? The second question was, how much is Lynn Marine paying for Dry Dock 4? The third question is, how much of that is a state lands lease? And the fourth question is, when you throw up those pictures of the impact of sea level rise on the Mare Island side, how come you don't throw up pictures on the Mare Island side? Wouldn't it be equally impacted by sea level rise?
Thank you, Chris. We appreciate the questions. I'm going to either let Tom or Brian talk.
I can jump on the rent question for Lynn Marine and Mare Island Dry Dock. Chris and everybody, we do not disclose the terms of our agreements with our tenants. And that cuts both ways. It's just part of what we do. We don't disclose that. So, there's another piece of it that I probably forgot, but
how much of that is a state lands lease?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a little technical, but I'll try and keep it concise. When the land transferred from the Navy to the city and ultimately to Lennar took it all the way to the seawall, which is very abnormal. But because of that action, they did it because of the soil contamination back 20 years ago. That is still retained under Lennar. And then there's a mechanism for it to be transferred once all of that land is cleaned up.
Thank you, Brian. And Chris, regarding the pictures, I'm responsible for putting pictures up. And today, since we were focused on North Mare Island, that's why we had pictures of North Mare Island. But you're absolutely right that we are going to be looking at all of the impacts of the entire island when we're working on our specific plan. So I'm going to go to the next person, and Chris, you can get in the queue with more questions. And I have a few that came in via chat that I can read. One question was, have we accounted for inflation in our numbers? And I think we were talking about today's dollars, but I'll let Tom take that.
No, we have not accounted for inflation. As I mentioned, the numbers that we showed, the city numbers for the reconstruction of infrastructure are from 2019. We didn't adjust them for inflation. So that's why we say that these estimates are not adjusted for inflation.
Thank you. I had somebody reach out and ask if they could speak to us at another time to ask some questions that some of this that we're talking about today doesn't answer or goes into the weeds in certain areas. Any of us would be happy to talk to anyone at any point in time. We have info@nimitz.com. If you send an email, I'm happy to get back to you and start a conversation. And if I'm certainly not the one who can answer your questions, I'll make sure that the right person can. We want to be as transparent as possible. And I know a lot of this I can't grasp, or it took me a long time to grasp. So we're happy to explain things in different ways because we all take in information differently. We have another question asking to explain again, what is the benefit to the city of Vallejo? And I'm not sure exactly what the question is. We just went through that. So maybe we could be a little more specific, saying that the term sheet has changed, and we just walked through the questions. We walked through the changes in the term sheet. So again, we'd be happy to have a direct conversation if we want to be, have specific questions. I don't want to keep going through the whole chart again. And Gillian, I see you have your hand up. Did you want to address that?
Yeah, thanks. Just really quickly, I just wanted to remind everyone, myvallejo.com has all of the project documents. It's a great website to go on. You can get the draft DDA. You can get the matrix that I reviewed tonight. You can get the CEQA addendum document that looks at the environmental impacts of this purchase and sale agreement. And then all my contact info, of course, is always there. So you can feel free to email or give me a call as well as the development team as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Gillian. We have a question asking about, will this DDA affect the amount of CFD taxes paid by Mare Island homeowners? If so, will homeowner taxes go up or down? I don't know, Tom, if you wanted.
I think that is to be determined, probably mostly in the specific plan, because the North Mare Island, again, it is not going to change in terms of development. So that development would adjust the base of property subjected to the tax. It's really going to be in the specific planning process, I believe, and Andrea or Gillian can correct me, that the CFD issues really come to the front.
No, you're absolutely right. I think that's an issue that will be addressed based on what is planned for the specific plan and what eventually gets developed. So yes, it will be talked about and dealt with during the specific plan process.
I think the DDA creates the platform for that happening, for that discussion to happen. But it doesn't happen just with the DDA, it happens in the specific plan
Great.
discussion.
Thank you, everyone, for your input. A question that comes up often is, do we have any plans for a grocery store or improving food access for Mare Island residents? The simple question is, absolutely, that will be part of our planning, but maybe Andrea, you can address that more specifically.
I think you're right. Absolutely. You know, it's going to be addressed in the specific plan. And we'll also look at that in terms of maybe a smaller scale market on Conley Street. That's one of the uses that we're looking at. And, you know, we will analyze that and bring that to you for comments and input. So yes, we definitely are looking at that both on a larger scale for the specific plan and a smaller scale for Conley Street.
Great, thank you. I have a couple that have come into my chat directly, and there was a question if we can plan on exterior paint for Admiral quarters, and I'll let Brian talk a little bit to that effect of how we're planning some of our work on the existing buildings. Also asking if we could focus on offering events with St. Peter's Chapel and the Admiral's quarters. And I can address that those are not areas that we are in control of, but I'll let Brian talk a little more about that. Although we are going to and continually work with our partners at the city to help them with events out there. So it's something we're looking at because we don't want to have our events just focused on the promenade. We want to activate the entire island.
Yeah, thanks, Cheryl. I'll get the quarters A and B in the chapel. Those aren't under our control. Those are controlled by the museum crew. So that would be something to bring up with them as far as events. Now, painting of Officers Row and all the mansions, that is going back to my mentioning of touching 20 plus buildings in 2022. Part of that is the refurbishment of a couple of the mansions on the island. So you will see that coming, and painting the exterior as part of that program, and that will be an ongoing program.
I think I would add one thing, Brian, to what you said, which is that we are spending a sizable amount of money on maintenance every year, but some of it is not as visible. But it's more important because if a roof collapses or if, you know, some of the other structural things that we have to deal with, and we have a lot of roofs, and we have a lot of things that you don't see that are important to maintain. And so, you know, we don't have the capacity to get to everything in one year, but we are looking at prioritization based on the risks associated with not doing the maintenance, what has to come to the fore.
Yeah, I would concur with Tom. In 2021, if you looked up a little bit on some of the big industrial buildings, we replaced 3 large roofs in 2021 that accounted for between $1 and $2 million. And a lot of that you just don't see, but you certainly hear about it if the roof leaks in the wintertime. So it's necessary work.
Great, thank you. A couple more questions kind of on the same vein for wedding type events. And again, we're not in charge of the chapel or the Admiral's Quarters A, but I do believe that they're working on having that available. Question also is about the museum. Again, we're not in charge of keeping the museum open. It is currently closed. I don't know if anyone on our team or Gillian want to address that at all. Gillian, you're on mute.
Yeah.
There we go. There we go.
Okay, keep saying you can't unmute. The host muted you. Okay. We did just meet with the new museum board president, Kent Fortner, last week. We're working on a plan with him. And so I guess if you have any questions about weddings and dates and whatnot, please reach out to Kent and his crew.
Great, thank you. That should be helpful for everyone. Also had a question asking if we could get a farmer's market on Tuesdays and Thursdays for the interim. We have reached out to several different organizations that do farmers markets. We've been trying to get in touch with the farmers market that's happening in Vallejo now. So if any of you have a contact or somebody that I could speak to, we would be thrilled to bring a farmers market out. So any input there, right there with you, would love that on an interim basis, and we'll keep looking. And let's see. How about a dog park? Yeah, that's I think in all of our hearts here. Gillian's dog's talking. Mine just got up and started talking. Yes, there are plans for a dog park at some point in time. I don't know if Andrea, if you want to add anything to that.
No, there absolutely are there are plans. We're all excited about having a dog park. We're looking at a possibility of a dog park in Conley Street is one of the first projects. So, stay tuned.
Yeah. Some ideas offering, if we can hire and train young adults as crew for painting the officers' quarters. I think that might be something that's a little bit specialized, but I do know that we're thinking about how we can get involved in some of the organizations that are working with youth and apprentice programs. So that is something in mind that we believe in, that we'll want to be part of our community give back.
Yeah, and I'd like to add that, we'll be partnering with the Solano Small Business Development Center and the Workforce Development Board of Solano County for job training. So as part of the DDA, that's a requirement for us. So we will be looking at those kinds of opportunities.
And Cheryl, you might want to mention the sponsorship we're doing with Project Vallejo.
Yeah, so Project Vallejo, some of you probably know about it. It's an organization that's working on doing a lot more with helping youth in the community and apprentice programs. And we've joined up with them with a small sponsorship this year that hopefully, as the program grows, we can get more involved and support that as well. There are several different organizations that are at least reaching out to us for sponsorships, and we're trying to do what we can in different areas. So we're reaching different members of the community and helping in different ways. So as we continue to get more involved in the development, we will continue to get more involved in the community and help a lot of these very worthwhile programs that are going on. Chris, I'm not sure if your hand's up from before or if it's up again, but let's go ahead and give you the floor.
Oh, thank you. I generally don't ask questions that I don't know the answer for, but I do know that the Mare Island Dry Dock pays about $200,000 a month for the use of 2 and 3. So if this is the level of transparency that we can expect, that's kind of weird to me. And the last question I have is, why would a billionaire spend $100 million on North Mare Island if you didn't expect at least a 10% return? So unless you explain that in some sort of transparent fashion, that whole Conley Street retail, blah, 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 it's just pie in the sky. Be real, man. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. It's always interesting to hear your questions. As far as transparency, I think most private companies don't completely open all of their books, but this, I can let either Tom or someone else.
Yeah, I would just say again what I said earlier, which is what is unusual about the Nimitz Group's investors is that they are taking a much longer horizon in looking at Mare Island. They are not looking for a quick flip. They're not looking for something fast. They are looking at this as a very long-term program. And if they weren't, the North Mare Island wouldn't make any sense. To acquire it under the terms that are in the DDA with all of the obligations to fix it. But I think part of the the rationale is that it is also a defensive move, in as much as if we, these costs are unlikely to be met by the city, and if we don't come up with them, yes, we look for a return on North Mare Island, but this is also looking at the larger investment in the other in the historic core and other parts of Mare Island that would be jeopardized if North Mare Island continued to be subject to these factors that we've talked about: liquefaction, sea level rise, poor soil conditions. All of those things could hurt all of Mare Island. So some of it is, yes, he is looking for a return, and yet he is not looking for a quick payback. He is looking for a long-term view of the future of Mare Island. And that's an unusual perspective, but he's in agriculture, and I guess you take a long-term view when you're in that business.
Thank you, Tom. And again, thank you for the question. I just got in my chat, somebody gave me a link to a college that teaches hands-on historic restoration and programs similar to what we may be looking at. So thank you, and I will look at that. We really do appreciate thoughts and input and opportunity to look at different things. One other question. Are you going to get your 4th of July fireworks back this year? And I can tell you that we are working on that. So happy to be able to answer that one because everyone's excited about it. So thank you for that question. Daniel Boone.
Hi, is this DDA coming up for vote to the City Council at the next meeting on March 22? And then a follow-on to that is, what is the timetable for the strategic plan that you mentioned earlier?
Great question. Thank you. Yes, the vote is on March 22, and I'll let Andrea speak to timetables.
So following closure of the DDA, we will, as I mentioned, start working on the specific plan. The DDA requires us to submit a specific plan to the city within 24 months of the closing of the North Mare Island DDA. It also requires us to get approval from the city within 42 months total. So hopefully we can all do that sooner, but those are the outside dates.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I am not seeing any more questions or any more hands raised, but we do want to make sure that we have answered your questions regarding the North Mare Island DDA. So anyone else? And I did receive another link, and I'm taking these, and I will follow up on getting more information. So thank you to those of you who are sending those to me. Okay, I think we are set. Thank you all again for participating, for showing your interest, for the good questions. And again, we would love to answer questions offline if you're more comfortable that way. So please do reach out, and go have a wonderful evening.
Yes, thank everyone. Thanks all of you for joining us.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.